The Gestapo called her the most dangerous of all Allied spies. Yet they were looking for a woman who shouldn't have been able to walk, let alone lead a resistance. How did a one-legged socialite become the Third Reich's most wanted fugitive? Behind the pearls and high society poise lay a lethal intelligence network that outmaneuvered the world's deadliest secret police. Virginia Hall was born into Baltimore high society in 1906. Educated, charming, fluent in 5 languages. The kind of woman who could walk into any room in the world and immediately own it. Which makes what happened next either very ironic or very on-brand, depending on how you look at it. She applied to the U.S. State Department to become a diplomat. They said no. She applied again. They said no again. She kept applying. They kept saying no, partly because of her gender, and partly because of what happened on a hunting trip in Turkey in 1933. Virginia accidentally shot herself in the foot, not metaphorically, literally. A misfired shotgun. The injury was so severe, her left leg had to be amputated below the knee. The State Department, never ones to waste an opportunity to be unhelpful, used this as yet another reason to reject her. Too much of a liability, they said. The prosthetic leg would slow her down. Reader, it did not slow her down. British intelligence wasn't much more encouraging when she approached them, a woman, an American, with a wooden leg, trying to operate in Nazi-occupied France. Their skepticism was understandable, if spectacularly wrong. But Virginia had something her critics lacked: the ability to be completely invisible by being completely visible. A one-legged socialite? Surely not a spy. Surely not a threat. The Third Reich was about to receive a very expensive education. When Virginia arrived in Lyon in 1941, she did what came naturally. She became the most interesting person in every room. Using her socialite background as cover, she embedded herself in the French elite. Officials, clergy, businessmen, the kind of people who talk too much at dinner when they feel comfortable. Virginia made sure they always felt comfortable. Meanwhile, behind the pearls and the pleasant conversation, she was building a lethal underground operation. She established the Hector Network, a sprawling resistance organization that coordinated safe houses, escape routes for downed Allied pilots, and supply drops of weapons and money. All of it happening directly under Nazi noses. Quite literally, some of the officials she was supplying resistance fighters against were sitting across the table from her at dinner. She also had a day job. As far as anyone official was concerned, Virginia Hall was simply an American journalist filing stories for the New York Post, a completely above-board, entirely legitimate cover that let her move freely through occupied territory, while the Gestapo tore their hair out trying to find her. They gave her a nickname, the Limping Lady. They distributed her description. They sent informants. They enlisted their most feared operative, Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, to hunt her down. Personally, Klaus Barbie, for reference, was one of the most ruthless men in the Nazi apparatus. Virginia Hall continued attending dinner parties. The Gestapo's most wanted fugitive was passing the bread rolls at the same tables as their officers, and they never once looked twice at the elegant American woman with the cane. It would be funny if it wasn't so terrifying. Actually, it's a little bit of both. By late 1942, the situation had changed. The US had entered the war. Germany occupied the previously free zone of southern France. Virginia's cover was unraveling, and Klaus Barbie was getting uncomfortably close. It was time to leave, urgently. The only viable escape route, 50 miles across the frozen Pyrenees Mountains, in winter, on foot. A journey that had defeated hardened soldiers and professional mountaineers. Virginia Hall did it on a prosthetic leg. Before she set off, she radioed her SOE handlers in London with a casual update. Cuthbert is giving me trouble, but I can cope. Cuthbert, as you may recall, was her name for her prosthetic leg. Her handlers, clearly not fully briefed on Virginia's naming conventions, radioed back with complete sincerity. If Cuthbert is causing difficulty, have him eliminated. Virginia, presumably, did not have time to explain. She had a mountain range to cross. She made it, across icy ridges, through altitude sickness, through pain that would have stopped most people long before the first pass. She reached Spain, where she was briefly thrown in prison, because neutral countries in World War II were not particularly sympathetic to unannounced Allied operatives showing up at the border. She got out of that, too. She made her way back to London, debriefed, recovered, and then asked to go back in. At this point, her superiors probably stopped being surprised. By 1944, Virginia had moved from British SOE to the American OSS, the organization that would eventually become the CIA. They were, apparently, more enthusiastic about sending her back into occupied France than she was about staying home. Her disguise this time was, frankly, a work of art. She entered France as Marcelle Montaigne, an elderly French peasant woman, gray hair, shapeless clothing, a shuffling, hunched walk, carefully designed to mask the limp that had made her famous across Nazi intelligence networks. The woman the Gestapo had been hunting for 3 years walked back into France looking like someone's grandmother. Operating from a remote farmhouse in the Haute-Loire region, Virginia spent the months before D-Day doing something the Nazis would have found deeply upsetting had they known. Training 3 full battalions of French resistance fighters, coordinating sabotage missions against German supply lines, cutting communications, disrupting troop movements, all while the Gestapo continued their increasingly frustrated search for the limping lady who was, at that moment, teaching farmers how to blow up railway lines about 40 miles away. Her intelligence gathering directly contributed to the capture of hundreds of German soldiers. Her sabotage operations fed into Allied planning for the Normandy invasion. The elderly peasant woman was helping win the war. Klaus Barbie never did find her. When the war ended, Virginia Hall was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the only civilian woman to receive it during World War II. General William Donovan personally wanted to present it to her in a public ceremony. Virginia said no. She was still undercover, and also, she simply didn't want the fuss. The woman who had outmaneuvered the Gestapo for years, crossed the Pyrenees on a prosthetic leg, trained resistance battalions disguised as a grandmother, and helped shape the outcome of the Second World War, declined a medal ceremony because it seemed a bit much. She joined the CIA when it was founded in 1947, continued working in intelligence, gave almost no interviews, wrote no memoir, retired quietly, died in 1982. The world barely knew her name, but every intelligence agency operating today has been shaped by what Virginia Hall pioneered: cover identity, psychological operations, resistance network management, the fundamental understanding that the best operative is the one nobody suspects. She proved something the world keeps having to relearn, that the people most dismissed are often the most dangerous. A one-legged socialite who the State Department rejected, who British intelligence doubted, who the Gestapo hunted relentlessly and never caught, who came back twice into occupied territory because the job wasn't finished. Virginia Hall didn't just survive behind enemy lines. She made the Third Reich look like amateurs. Quietly, deliberately, in pearls.